Hey guys, and welcome to the first of two build videos for the Magicka Dragonknight in the Elder Scrolls Online Greymoor patch. This first build video is going to be a light armor non-mythic setup, and the second build video is going to be a heavy armor mythic setup. So definitely check out whichever one you're interested in. If you want to give views to both, that would help me as well. But before we jump right into this build, I want to give a quick shout out to my friend Payman the Axe. He is another Magicka Dragonknight player as well as a Twitch streamer. He does a lot of PvP, pretty much exclusively PvP, except the times that he was fishing for his Thrashy Stranglers. But he's very good at dueling, battlegrounds, and open world PvP, and runs a build that excels in all of those. So what I will be doing is I will be linking his build in the description below, as well as linking his Twitch channel in the description below. So definitely go check him out. He's a really, really entertaining dude and a really, really solid player that I had the pleasure of getting to know better over the past couple months with all of us being in quarantine and playing video games. So now let's jump into our build. We are running as an Imperial Dragonknight. If you know me and if you watched any of my build videos in the past, you know that I love Imperial for Dragonknight. I think the race synergizes so well with the class, and the main reason is the Red Diamond passive. So this passive reduces the cost of all of our abilities by 3%, and yes, that is all of your abilities. That includes block and roll dodge and ultimate costs. The second part of this passive is that when you deal direct damage, you heal yourself as well as get Magicka and stamina back. This adds to our sustain. The thing here is that it can occur every 5 seconds and you need to deal direct damage. Dragonknight has two pools of direct damage to pull from. The first is, being in combat, dealing damage with light attacks, your abilities. This is all considered direct damage. The second is volatile armor. Volatile armor is a thorn ability. And what that means is that players who attack you while this ability is up receive damage back to them. And that damage that is returned to them is considered direct damage. So as long as you have volatile armor up and you're in combat dealing damage with abilities, you will more than likely be proccing Red Diamond on cooldown. And that's just going to make Imperial sustain much better. Imperial also gets 2,000 extra health and 2,000 extra stamina. And what this does for us is that it allows us to build straight into Magicka and our armor enchants. We do not have to spec into things like tri-stack glyphs, the triune jewelry trait, or anything like that. We will get the same stat pools as our Britain and High Elf counterparts by simply stacking into Magicka, because those races need to spec more into tri-stack. So for our character sheet, we're doing 64 points into Magicka. We are going to have 34k Magicka, 27k health, 17k stamina, with just about 1300 Magicka recovery, a little bit less than 1100 health recovery, and pretty much 1100 stamina recovery. Very rounded out recovery stats. Our unbuffed spell damage is going to be 2.4k. We're going to have 42.7% spell critical. Our unbuffed resists are going to be 15.8 and 10.7 on our staff bar, and 20.4 and 15.3 unbuffed on our sword and shield bar. Our critical resistance is going to be 3k. We are not a vampire in this build. We are running the Apprentice Mundus, and we are running Wish Sugar Skulls as our food. For the sets we're running, this is a 5 light to heavy armor build. Our heavy armor pieces come from our chest, and our legs, our head, shoulder, arms, sash, and boots make up our light armor pieces. We are running 3 arcane rings, a Nirntone staff, a defending one-hand back bar, and a sturdy shield back bar. Our gear traits are 3 infused on our big pieces, 4 impend on our small pieces. Everything on our gear is Magicka. Everything on our jewelry is spell damage. We're running a Berserker enchant for the staff, and we are running double dot and stam drain poisons for our back bar. Our first set is going to be Eternal Vigor. Eternal Vigor, I'm sure you've heard by now, is a very, very good set that comes out of the new Greymoor patch. You can obtain it. It's an overland set in Western Skyrim. What makes Eternal Vigor so good is two things. Is the sheer amount of sustain that comes from this set is incredible. We do not have to build into any sort of sustain at all. In the past, we needed things like the Atronach, Brightthroat's Boast, to give us enough sustain as a Mag DK. We no longer need those things with Eternal Vigor. We just need Eternal Vigor. Like we saw before, we're running the Apprentice now for more damage, and we're still getting comparable recovery to Bright Throat, albeit at a little bit less max Magicka, but that's not really that much of a deal. The second thing that makes this set really good is what happens when you're below 50% health. When you're below 50% health, you get a massive amount of health recovery. And health recovery is really good because it's a healing stat that's unaffected by Battle Spirit. Meaning, whatever your health recovery is the true number that you're going to be getting back every 2 seconds. So with this setup on our back bar, with Eternal Vigor proc for the health recovery while under 50% health, we're going to be sitting at over 2k health recovery, which is crazy good. It's just going to help push us out of execute range faster, and it's going to help us shoot back up to above 50% to get back our Magicka and stamina recovery that much quicker. It is a really, really solid set open world. Probably currently one of the best. Our second 5-piece is Burning Spellweave. Now, this is where the build setup becomes a little bit difficult because you do need to run Eternal Vigor as 2 body and 3 jewelry because you want Eternal Vigor to be a static 5-piece. You never want to lose the simple bar swapping. So that means that Burning Spellweave has to be 3 body pieces and unfortunately a weapon. And I understand, and believe me I understand, that if some of you don't have this weapon. It took me 5 years of on and off grinding to finally get this weapon, and I did get it a few months ago. So if you do not have Burning Spellweave, I do have 3 other options for you that you can run in place of it as damage sets. The first one is going to be Silks of the Sun. This is an overland set that comes from Stonefalls, meaning you can buy it on guild traders as well as farming it from world bosses, dolmens, chests, and delve bosses. And there are some quests that gives these items as rewards. This staff in particular, this is an Inferno staff for Silks of the Sun. This comes from, I believe it's the last quest in Stonefalls. It comes as defending though, so you will need to transmute it, and it is also pretty cheap to buy on the guild vendor. The second set is Innate Axiom. An Innate Axiom is a craftable set. It's 5 traits, and it can be crafted in Clockwork City. You need to have the Clockwork City DLC or ESO Plus, which will give you the Clockwork City DLC in order to gain access to this set. It functions similarly as Sun, but the difference is Sun gives you 400 spell damage to flame abilities, whereas Innate Axiom gives you 400 spell damage to class abilities. And Coagulating Blood and Cauterize are considered class abilities, so it will increase their heal, whereas Sun will only increase the healing done on Burning Embers. But Sun will give you a little bit overall higher DPS because you have an additional spell damage line, where with Innate Axiom you trade that spell damage for spell critical. The third and final set that I would recommend to run with this, and I don't think I have a piece of it on me currently, is Spinners. Spinners is a really good set. You're getting 2 lines of Magicka, 1 line of spell damage, and a ton of penetration out of the 5-piece. Penetration is such a powerful stat in PvP, so much so that I think that set is a very viable replacement to Burning Spellweave if you can get your hands on it. Our last set is going to be Bloodspawn, and I know it got nerfed, so why am I running it? Couple reasons. Well, it doesn't give the crazy amount of spell and physical resist that it used to give. 3,300 spell and physical resist every 5 seconds is still a respectable amount of armor and a respectable amount of damage mitigation to be getting. The 1-piece stam recovery is also very welcome in our build. And the 8 ultimate that we're going to get as well when this procs. Again, it's not as high as it used to be, but it's more ultimate that you're going to be getting out of any 2-piece monster set in the game. So I still think it's while it's not the clear-cut best choice monster set anymore, I still think it's pretty good, and I still think it's pretty good on Magicka DK, and I still think it's pretty good on a light armor build, which is the main reason that we're running this. Last thing, for staff trait, you have options here. Nernhone, Sharpened, or Charged is what I recommend. Charged is a really good trait for Inferno staff, especially on Magicka, and you may have heard about it from Knott's Gaming by now, who's been running it for a very long time, and has been boasting about it, and he is correct. It is a very, very good trait on Magicka. What Charge is going to do is it's going to increase your chance to proc Burning, and as a Dragonite, whenever we proc Burning, we get 500 Magicka back from our Combustion passive. As well as Burning will deal, I think Burning deals like 2k damage when it procs, so you're getting damage from more Burning procs as well. Now, the only thing is that I think that Charged is much better when you pair it with something like Grothdar. Grothdar is flame damage as well, and Grothdar is going to be able to proc Burning on its own. So in between Grothdar procking Burning, all your flame damage abilities procking Burning, and then Charged making you proc even more Burning, it's an incredible amount of sustain and extra damage that you can get, specifically paired with Grothdar. I think for our build with Bloodspawn, and for how good the sustain feels to me in this build, I don't need to run it. And because of that, I want to go with more damage. I want my Berserker enchant for increased damage, and I want Nerd Helm for increased damage. Fully buffed, our spell damage in this build is a little bit over 3,900. It's a lot of spell damage. It's going to make your healing hit so much harder, and it's going to make your damage hit so much harder. And when you're playing in open world, outnumbered situations, you want to be able to deal a lot of damage in a very small window. And that's what I think Nerdhoned and this Berserker enchant help us accomplish in this build. Sharpened is also a very good trait. I believe Sharpened will beat out Nerdhoned in overall damage just because penetration is such a strong stat. And honestly, you lose 200 spell damage going from Nerdhoned to Sharpened, and it's really not that big of a difference on the toolkit. So it is very, very much a good trait that you could run instead of Nerdhoned if you want to. Jewelry, real quick. I would recommend Arcane instead of Infused. The difference in damage for Magicka between Infused and Arcane is very different. Is very small. It's so small that in my opinion it doesn't create much of a difference at all. The only thing that it would do for you is give you better healing, but I think you have good enough healing with as much spell damage as you can get on this build, and our Magicka pool is a little bit lower than we're used to, so I wouldn't recommend going any lower than 34k personally. So I'm going to suggest that you stick with Arcane. And now let's go over our skill bars really quick. So our front bar is going to be Burning Embers, Fossilize, Elemental Drain, Flame Lash, Cauterize, and Ferocious Sleep for ultimate. Our back bar is going to be Coagulating Blood, Race Against Time, Engulfing Flame, Degeneration, Volatile Armor, and Temporal Guard as our ultimate. Temporal Guard here, because Minor Protection synergizes really well with the Potentate's back bar, it's going to give us a lot of mitigation while we're on that Sword and Shield bar. There are a couple flex spots on this bar in particular, and let's get into them right now. So, Race Against Time, really good, gives you Major Expedition and Minor Force, so increases your movement speed by 30% and your critical damage by 10%. It's also going to act as a snare removal and immunity. So this ability does a lot in a single cast for us. It gives us great mobility, which otherwise Magicka Dragonknight has no access to outside of Chains. Chains will also give you Major Expedition, but the really nice thing about Race Against Time is the Minor Force. Being able to increase our critical damage by 10% is big. And we have a lot of critical chance on this build, so you can definitely take advantage of Minor Force very well. The other ability I would suggest running in place of it is Protective Plate. I know a lot of people really miss the old scales that reflect, but I really do think that the scales we have now are really, really strong. 50% damage mitigation on projectiles for 6 seconds is kind of crazy, and this ability also acts as immunity and snare removal, or immunity and removal to snares and immobilizes for us as well. So what you're really doing here is you're picking between more defense or more mobility and damage. I tend to like Protective Plate more open world because being able to mitigate damage from things like snipe, crystal frags, flame reaches, poison injects is really, really helpful in outnumbered fights, and I tend to like that more than the mobility, so I usually stick with Protective Plate, but Race Against Time is also a very, very good option. Our second flex spot is Engulfing Flames. Engulfing Flames is really strong, and especially strong when you combine it with Elemental Drain. you're going to do a ton of damage to that single target that you have it on. My issue with Engulfing Flames is I think it's really good in 1v1, 1v2, 1v3, but as soon as you start getting 4, 5, 6 above more players, I think this ability becomes less useful compared to the other abilities you can put here that'll increase your survivability. And that first ability is Draw Essence. Draw Essence is really good. It's going to give us a heal as well as an explosion of damage that's also going to return resources to us. So this ability does a lot. And the explosion portion of this ability is a really good tool for burst combos. You can Draw Essence, Fossilize, and whip somebody and have the Draw Essence go off as you whip or Power Lash for a ton of damage. You can Draw Essence, Fossilize into Leap, and then whip, and then have all that damage kind of go one right after the other. It's just a really good ability overall, and it's a really good ability outnumbered when you're fighting a lot of people. The second ability I would put here is Burning Talents. Burning Talents has kind of made its way back into Magicka DK PvP because of Elfbane, but I think this ability, even before the Elfbane buff, was still really, really good, kind of underrated, kind of slept on. While the increased dot damage of it with Elfbane is nice, to me, that's not the point of Talents. The point of Talents is CC. What DK lacks in mobility, it makes up for it with crowd control, and this ability is a perfect example of this. When you talent somebody, a couple of things are going to happen. But the three big ones are someone's going to roll dodge out of it to get out of it, someone's going to consume a GCD to cast an ability that gets them out of stairs or immobilizes, and 3, somebody's going to have no idea what's going on, and he's going to stand there just bashing until he realizes that he can't. Now, the thing in common that all of these have is that while they're going on, that player is not dealing damage to you. The ability to cast an ability and stop multiple people from dealing damage to you is insane. It's such a good form of damage mitigation, like an indirect form of damage mitigation. It's crazy. Talons also lets you do a lot of other things. It creates space. It helps you when kiting. You can peel for people and talons them and root them in place so your friends can get away. It really is just, it's an all-around amazing ability. And I think it's really worth the bar slot on here on this build when you're fighting against a lot of targets. Alright, and last but not least, our champion points. So we're doing 56 into Warlord, 75 Arcanist, 45 Tenacity. We put 34 points into Healthy here to bump up our health recovery to help us, with Eternal Vigor. It synergizes really nicely. We also want to make sure we get the Wind Running passive, increases movement and mounted movement speed by 2%, and increases our health and magic recovery by 10% while sprinting. Totally worth getting, in my opinion. 20 points into Tumbling, 40 points into Shadow Ward. We're running 44 into Blessed, 41 into Elfborn, 56 into Elemental Expert, 41 into Spell Erosion, 56 into Master at Arms, and 32 into Thaumaturge. With the healing nerf that happened this patch, definitely needed to put more points into Blessed that I had, so I pulled points out of pretty much every damage CP I had to put more into Blessed. I do not think Exploiter is good. I do not think Exploiter is worth it, even if you are running Flame Lash. The amount of damage, the amount of overall consistent damage that I would lose by pulling more points out of things like Master at Arms, Elemental, Spell Erosion, and Elfborn is not worth it. I already needed to pull points back to put into healing to begin with, so I do not want to pull any more points to go into Exploiter. And I really think 10% damage on Power Lash, which can only happen on a single target every 18 seconds, to me is not worth it. And to me is definitely not worth it in outnumbered PvP situations. I just don't think this passive is good at all. Red Tree is going to be 56 Ironclad, 38 Resistant, 43 Hardy, 43 Elemental Defender, 56 Thick Skin, and 34 into Quick Recovery. Again, healing nerf. We needed more points into Quick Recovery here, so we took some out of Hardy and Elemental Defender. We also don't need as many points into Resistant with the critical resist changes on Impen and the baseline on your character, so we're able to put less in here and take the remaining and put it into Quick Recovery. So that's the first build. This was our light armor non-mythic setup. If you guys want to check out, there will be a second video for a heavy armor mythic setup and thanks for watching.